The warning sirens had been silent for 3 days when the mountain finally spoke. Nariku, a senior scientist among the Amatakaya clan, stood at the edge of the forest and watched the humans scramble around their small outpost like insects disturbed from their nest. He had studied them for many cycles now, these strange creatures who came from the sky in their metal birds. He had seen them struggle to breathe their own air, seen them wilt under the heat of their sun, seen them stumble and fall in the dense jungle that his people called home. But he had never seen them face the wrath of Awa's fire. Mount Calatrol had been dormant for generations. The Na'vi knew its moods, its gentle rumbles, the warm springs that bubbled at its base. They built no permanent homes near its slopes, for the elders remembered the stories of fire and ash from long ago. The humans, however, had built their research station directly in its shadow. They had drilled into the earth, pulled out rocks and minerals, and declared the mountain safe based on their calculations. Nariku had warned them. He had spoken to Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of their science team, about the signs he had observed. The Ikran had fled the mountain cliffs weeks ago. The ground creatures had moved to lower elevations. Even the trees seemed to lean away from the slopes, as if trying to escape something only they could sense. Dr. Vasquez had listened politely, nodded her head, and then returned to her instruments and charts. Now the mountain was awake, and there was no time for calculations. The first explosion came at dawn. A column of ash and fire shot into the sky, turning day into night. The ground shook so violently that Nariku was thrown from his feet. When he rose, he saw something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The humans were not running away from the mountain. They were running toward each other. Dr. Vasquez stood in the center of the chaos, shouting orders that somehow cut through the roar of the eruption. Around her, humans moved with a purpose that Nariku did not understand. Some were gathering equipment. Others were loading vehicles. A group of young scientists was pulling sheets of metal from a storage container and hammering them together with a speed that seemed impossible. A river of molten rock began to flow down the mountain's face. It was slow at first, almost beautiful in its terrible glow. But Nariku knew that beauty was death. He had seen what happened to creatures caught in such flows. Nothing survived. Nothing remained. He expected the humans to flee. Their flying machines were ready. Their vehicles were running. They could escape if they left now, abandoned their station and their work, and ran like any sensible creature would run. But they did not run. Instead, they began to build. Nariku watched in disbelief as the humans constructed a wall of metal and earth between themselves and the approaching lava. It was crude, desperate work. Men and women dug trenches with their bare hands when the machines were not fast enough. They poured water on the metal sheets to keep them from melting. They filled bags with soil and stacked them higher and higher. The ash began to fall like black snow. Nariku covered his breathing holes and retreated further into the forest, but he could not look away. A human woman collapsed from the heat, and 2 others immediately dragged her to safety, while a third took her place at the wall. There was no hesitation, no argument. They simply continued working as if they had practiced this dance of survival 1,000 times before. The lava reached the wall just as the sun set. Nariku expected the barrier to fail immediately. Metal and earth against the blood of the planet seemed like madness, but the wall held. The humans had dug channels to divert some of the flow. They had created weak points that they broke open deliberately, sending streams of lava around the sides of their station rather than through it. Throughout the night, the battle continued. The lava pushed against the wall, and the humans pushed back. When one section began to fail, they abandoned it and built another behind it. When their water supplies ran low, they used dirt to cool the metal instead. When their tools broke, they used their hands. Nariku saw burns on their skin that would have sent a Na'vi into shock. He saw exhaustion so deep that humans fell asleep standing up, only to be shaken awake by their companions and sent back to work. He saw fear in their eyes, real and raw and honest. But he also saw something else. He saw refusal. These creatures refused to die. By morning, the worst of the eruption had passed. The lava flow slowed and began to cool at the edges. The column of ash grew smaller, though it still painted the sky gray. And the human station somehow, impossibly, still stood. Nariku made his way down from his observation point to get a closer look. What he found was a scene of devastation and triumph mixed together in ways he could not separate. The ground around the station was black and smoking. The wall the humans had built was a twisted ruin of melted metal and scorched earth. But the buildings behind it were intact. The people inside were alive. Dr. Vasquez sat on an overturned container, her face covered in ash and her hands wrapped in bandages. She looked up as Nariku approached, and despite everything, she smiled. It was not a smile of joy or celebration. It was something else entirely. It was the smile of someone who had looked death in the face and said no. "You warned us," she said, her voice rough from shouting and smoke. "I should have listened." Nariku looked at the destruction around them, at the humans who had fought against a force of nature and somehow won. "Why did you not flee?" he asked. "Your flying machines could have carried you to safety." Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. "We thought about it," she admitted. "But we couldn't take everyone. We couldn't take our research, our samples, years of work. And we couldn't leave anyone behind." She looked at the ruins of the wall. "So we stayed. We fought. We survived." "That is not survival," Nariku said slowly. "Survival is running from danger. What you did was something else." Dr. Vasquez laughed, though it turned into a cough halfway through. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it was stubborn. Maybe it was stupid. But it's what we do. It's what we've always done." She gestured at the sky, at the stars hidden behind the ash clouds. "We came from a world that tried to kill us 1,000 different ways. Ice ages, plagues, famines, wars, and we're still here. Not because we're the strongest or the fastest, but because we don't know how to give up." Nariku considered her words. His people had lived in harmony with Pandora for generations beyond counting. They knew when to bend like the grass and when to stand firm like the great trees. But they also knew when to flee, when to accept that some forces were beyond any creature's ability to resist. The humans apparently did not share this wisdom. Or perhaps they had a different kind of wisdom entirely. Over the following days, Nariku returned to observe the humans as they recovered from the disaster. He expected them to pack up and leave, to admit defeat and find a safer location for their work. Instead, they began to rebuild. More than that, they began to improve. The new structures they erected were reinforced against heat. The trenches they dug around the station became permanent channels, designed to redirect any future lava flows. They transformed their near destruction into a lesson, and they applied that lesson immediately. News of the survival spread through the Na'vi clans like wind through leaves. Some dismissed it as luck. Others claimed the humans had angered the spirits and deserved whatever fate befell them. But Nariku told the truth of what he had witnessed. He spoke of the wall they built with bleeding hands. He described the way they worked together without hesitation, each person knowing their role without being told. He explained how they had turned their weakness into strength through nothing but determination and refusal to accept defeat. The elders listened in silence. When Nariku finished, the oldest among them spoke. "The creatures from the sky are not like us," he said. "They do not hear Ewa. They do not feel the bond that connects all living things. We have seen them as invaders, as destroyers, as children who do not understand the world they have entered." He paused, his ancient eyes reflecting the firelight. "But perhaps we have not seen all that they are. A creature that fights against the fire of the earth and wins, that stands when all wisdom says to run, that rebuilds what was destroyed in the same place it fell. This is not a creature to dismiss lightly." Months passed. The mountain settled back into its long sleep. The human station stood as a testament to what had happened. Its walls scarred, but standing. Dr. Vasquez and her team continued their research, but something had changed between them and the Na'vi. Where there had been suspicion, there was now curiosity. Where there had been distance, there were now conversations. Nareka visited the station often. He brought knowledge of the land, warnings about weather patterns and animal migrations. In return, the humans shared their own knowledge. They showed him how they predicted earthquakes, how they measured the temperature of rock deep beneath the surface, how they built structures that could withstand forces that seemed impossible to resist. "Your people have lived here for so long," Dr. Vasquez said one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossible. "You must think we're foolish, building so close to danger." Nareko thought about his answer carefully. "I thought you were foolish," he admitted. "I thought you were arrogant to believe you could stand against the mountain. I thought you would learn humility through loss." He turned to look at her, this small creature who had commanded her people through fire and ash. "I was wrong. We are arrogant," Dr. Vasquez said with a small smile. "It's probably our biggest flaw. We look at something impossible and think we can do it anyway. Sometimes that gets us killed. But sometimes," she gestured at the station, at the rebuilt walls and the new equipment and the people moving about their work. "Sometimes it lets us do things that shouldn't be possible." Nariku nodded slowly. "My people believe that Awa tests all creatures," he said. "The weak flee from these tests. The strong endure them. But you humans, you do not simply endure. You take the test and demand a rematch. You fail and try again. You lose and refuse to accept the loss. Is that bad?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "I do not know," Nariku answered honestly. "It is different. It is not the way of Pandora. But perhaps that is why you were able to survive something that should have destroyed you. You did not accept that destruction was inevitable. You chose to fight, even when fighting seemed pointless." Dr. Vasquez looked out at the darkening sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere among them was Earth, the world her ancestors had left behind. A world that had tested humanity with ice and fire, with plague and famine, with every disaster imaginable. And humanity had survived. Not always gracefully, not always wisely, but stubbornly, relentlessly, impossibly, they had survived. "We learned it the hard way," she said quietly. "Our planet wasn't kind to us. It wasn't gentle. It threw everything it had at us, and we had to learn to throw it right back. Maybe that's why we came here, to Pandora. Not just to explore or to take resources, but because we can't stop pushing forward, can't stop testing ourselves against new challenges." Nariku watched her in the fading light. This creature who could not breathe his air, who burned under his sun, who was fragile in 100 different ways. And yet here she stood, in a place where the earth itself had tried to consume her, talking about pushing forward and testing herself against new challenges. "The mountain will erupt again someday," he said. "Perhaps not for many generations, but it will wake once more." Dr. Vasquez nodded, unsurprised. "We know. We're already preparing for it. Better walls, better channels, better warning systems. Next time, we'll be ready. You could simply move somewhere safer." "We could," she agreed. "But we won't. The soil here is rich because of the volcanic minerals. The ecosystem around the mountain is unique. And," she paused, searching for the right words, "and we beat it once. That means something. It means we belong here, that we've earned our place." Nariku thought about this for a long time after he left the station that night. His people had lived on Pandora since time beyond memory. They belonged to the forest, and the forest belonged to them. But belonging had never required them to fight for their place, not like this. The land accepted them because they accepted the land. The humans had a different relationship with the world. They did not accept. They negotiated. They adapted. They pushed back against forces that seemed insurmountable, and somehow found ways to overcome them. It was not harmony. It was something more like a constant conversation, a back and forth between creature and environment that never truly ended. Years later, when Naraku was an elder himself, he would tell the story of the volcanic eruption to young Navi. He would describe the wall of metal and earth, the humans working through the night, the refusal to flee, even when flight was the only sensible option. And he would end with a lesson that his own teachers had never taught him. There are many ways to live in this world, he would say. The way of our people is to listen to Awa, to move with the rhythms of the land, to accept what comes and find peace within it. This is a good way. It has served us well for countless generations. He would pause then, looking at the young faces around the fire. But the Sky people have taught me that there is another way. Their way is to challenge what comes, to push back against the world, to refuse defeat even when defeat seems certain. They are not stronger than us. They are not wiser. But they have something we do not have. They have endurance that does not know surrender. The young Navi would listen, some skeptical, some curious. And Naraku would finish with the words he had thought about for many years. The conclusion he had finally reached about the strange creatures from the sky. When the living fire came down from the mountain, every creature with sense fled. The birds took to the sky. The ground dwellers ran to the rivers. Even the great trees bent away from the heat. But the humans stood and built a wall with their bleeding hands, and they held that wall through the night. And when the sun rose, they were still standing. He would shake his head slowly, still amazed after all these years. That is not wisdom as we know it. It is not harmony with the world, but it is something. Something that made even the mountain respect them. Something that earned them their place among the fires and the ash. And in the distance, visible from the gathering place when the sky was clear, the human station still stood at the base of Mount Kelatrol. Its walls had been rebuilt stronger. Its channels had been dug deeper. Its people had grown from a small research team to a thriving community that worked alongside the Navi in ways that would have seemed impossible before the eruption. The mountain still rumbled sometimes, deep in its stone heart. The humans still listened to those rumbles, measured them, prepared for them. And if the day ever came when the fire flowed again, everyone who knew the story of that first night believed the same thing. The humans would stand. They would fight. And somehow, impossibly, stubbornly, beautifully, they would survive.